Thank you, you two. It's a privilege to sit up here because you get to see the mouths of the people in the church and how many were mouthing the words to that song as she sang. And I also want to thank my wife for publicly announcing that I was second fiddle and she wasn't. I wasn't what she was looking for. I'd never heard that before. This morning in Sunday school, we were talking, and I got some great direction from the Sunday school class. I've been nervous all week about this theme, and I got a couple of calls. One from my Joan and called me, and somebody else called me. He said, "Well, you got a great theme. You can spit that out. That's no big deal." I said, "Well, it's no big deal to you because you don't have to speak." It was a big deal to me, and I was nervous, and I had a bad time, and I shared at prayer service this week. I had a rotten week and a rotten day, and things were just not too cherry. And then in Sunday school this morning, I'm supposed to be watching for signals in the back. There's this one, and the most important one, which Marge shared. So if I abruptly leave, I saw Marge. And in that, I can't help but remember the story of the little boy who was in church and listened to the pastor's sermon and had no idea what he said. And as he walked out, he remembered the offering money that he had in his pocket. And the minister stood in the back of the church, much the same as we do, and he was shaking hands with the parishioners as they left. And as the minister reached down to shake the little boy's hand and say good morning, the little boy handed him $1 and some change. He said, "Oh, little Johnny, what's this for?" He said, "I don't know what you said up there, but my dad says you was the poorest preacher in town." So here we go. As Janice read this week's theme, or this scripture that tied with this week's theme, live and love, I couldn't help but be reminded of what David Shaw said this year at reunion. He talked about reading a scripture over and over and thinking about it and praying about it and re-looking at it and sharing it, and how much it would affect your life as your week went on. And you would learn more about that scripture, and words would begin to jump out at you and have special meaning. I even went so far as to something I learned a few years ago from an instructor, is to put your 5 senses to a theme or an idea or a thought. I could smell it, I could taste it, I could feel it, I could hear it, I could touch it. Live and love. Sounds pretty simple. But the more I began to think about this, the more I was reminded of a theme that I read or we recite every week at my Optimist Club. And yes, I'm in an Optimist group. I remember the first time I went to Optimist and we read this theme, and I thought, boy, this is talking to me. It's telling me to change my life, and as much the same as today's theme. Because you got to understand, folks, I'm the biggest half glass full you ever saw. I'm the biggest pessimist. If it's going to go bad, it's going to go bad. And I'll be right at the head of it. I want to share this Optimist Creed. Is anyone here in the Optimist Club ever been? Okay. Carlin, you guys will know this. I want to share the Optimist Creed. Promise yourself to be so strong that nothing can disturb your peace of mind. To talk health, happiness, and prosperity with every person you meet. To make all your friends feel that there's something in them. To look at the sunny side of everything and make your optimism come true. To think only of the best, to work only for the best, and to expect only the best. To be just enthusiastic about the success of others as you are about your own. To forget the mistakes of the past and press on to the greater achievements of the future. To wear a cheerful countenance at all times and give every living creature you meet a smile. To give so much time to the improvement of yourself that you have no time to criticize others. To be too large for worry, too noble for anger, too strong for fear, and too happy to permit the presence of trouble. So naturally, you can see why, given my personality, I struggled with today's theme. However, I think this week's scripture and this theme gives us direction. In layman's terms, speak the truth. Don't let your anger run your life, something I struggle with. Be happy. Let all that anger and fear and trepidation run right off your back like water. Be excited about the success of others. Don't utter bad words and gossip. Now, there's a good one for me. I recall a sign that used to hang in one of the offices at Key Real Estate. It said, if you don't have something good to say about somebody, sit down here right next to me. I won't say whose office that was in, Marge. So while thinking about these scriptures, I began to ask myself another question. If I don't follow this scripture, if I don't follow these rules, can I call myself a good Christian? So how do we live in love? Or how might we ask to be a better Christian, to live a Christ-like life? I'm certain if that question was asked to Don or theology majors, they'd have all kinds of answers. But it's something I've struggled with all week. So I want to share just a few thoughts and ideas in what I call layman's words about how to live in love. First is share hospitality. We have to be willing to open our doors to strangers. I remember several years ago, we lived on Trail Ridge, and I'd worked all day, and I was tired, I was wore out, and I couldn't wait to get home, sit down and eat a nice quiet meal and sit in my chair and relax. And I drove in, and there were some cars out front I didn't recognize. I thought, well, maybe the neighbors have somebody over. And you guessed it, I opened the door. There were 6 Mormon missionaries sitting at my table, eating my supper and taking my time. I was uncomfortable. I was unhappy. But I sat down, and you know what? It was a good night. We shared a little bit about religion. We shared about family. We shared about the missions they'd been on, the missions they were planning to finish. And I enjoyed that evening, and it wasn't all that painful. It didn't kill me. And I found that opening my door, which I have trouble with, still to this day, is good. Or maybe we need to reach out to the homeless on the street. I remember several years ago, there was a guy that stood at the corner of 4th Street and Broadway. And he'd always had a sign, "We'll work for food." Once again, Janice showed me up. She came home that night and she said, you know that guy that stands on the street? I go, yeah, I see him every day. She said, I took him and got him some groceries. What did you do that for? Because he needed groceries. Naturally thinking that he wouldn't be there the next day. But he was. We'll work for food. Much the same as that homeless person, I think of really going out on a limb. Anyone ever given $1 or $2 to someone on the street? Someone has a sign that says, need food, broke, need money, I want to eat, haven't eaten in 3 days. It's easy to give them a couple bucks. How hard would it be to say, hey, hop in the car here. Let's go to the neighborhood restaurant. We'll sit down and eat a meal together. Can you imagine spending an hour with a homeless person in a restaurant where you actually shared a meal with them and you don't care what they order? You share conversation and time. You live in love. Does that put you out of your comfort zone? The next point, I call it reach out and touch someone. The old Ma Bell slogan. Pick up the phone and call somebody you haven't heard from in a long time. Or better yet, go see them. Greet a stranger with a smile, maybe on the street or in the mall or a gas station. Share some happiness with them. It may take just a kind hello. I've seen this in action. A few years ago, I was in South Dakota fueling our vehicles up, and Jim was in the aisle next to me. I got done, I pulled up, and I went back and stood by Jim and waited for him to fill his tank. And this guy pulled up in his pickup, and being myself, I stood there and kept my mouth shut and watched Jim. Jim looks, he's pumping his fuel. He looks around the pump, says to the guy, he goes, "Hey, how are you?" And naturally, the guy said, "Well, I'm doing pretty good." Jim says, "Where are you from?" And the guy said, "Some town in North Dakota." I don't know where he was from. Jim goes, "You're kidding me." "No." "You don't know so-and-so, do you?" The guy said, "Well, yeah, that's my uncle." To which Jim replies, "Heck, I went to jail with him." We stood there and had a great conversation. Each one of us got a little chuckle and had a smile on our face. It made us feel good. It was simple. Point 3, share compassion for others. Some years ago, we traveled to St. Louis to visit Janice's Uncle Don and Nene. And any of you that know Don Schneider, used to be a member here many years ago, Don is a great listener. He'll ask you question after question after question. And he's intently interested in what you have to say. I remember arriving at their house, and they came out and greeted us, and everybody stood there in the driveway, and Don looks at me as he would, and he goes, "Brad, let's talk, you and me. Just come with me." So I followed him away, and everybody went in the house. Don and I started down the street. And for the next hour, we walked all the way around his entire subdivision. He asked me questions about my life, my job, my work. We had recently purchased a company from Janice's parents. He wanted to know how that was going. He asked about each one of my kids. He even asked about my sister that I think he's met once in his life. He was intently interested, not so much in that we were there to visit, but he wanted to know how things were going. Share your ear with someone. And you may not want to, but listen. You never know when you need to be that good listener. Fourthly, volunteer for a charity. Does anybody volunteer at charity work? It's a good deal, and you'll feel better when you do it. A few years ago, Janice and I were introduced to the Rough and Ready Rodeo. It's at the Quest Center on Friday during the River City Roundup Rodeo. It's for young, handicapped, mentally and physically handicapped kids. They come in, some are in wheelchairs, some are in walkers, some can hardly walk. They go around the arena floor. There'll be cowboys and rodeo personnel there that will throw a rope with them. Some of them have stick races. Our job that day was to ride. We took our horses over, and our job was to lead these horses around the arena while these kids sat on their back. Some of these kids would hop on and have a great time and smile, and they'd never, let alone seen a horse or been on one. So we did this for several kids around the arena, and then finally one little boy come over, and he walked with a walker, and his dad held his hand even in the walker, and he struggled just to get to the platform to get on the horse. And we had to work. There's somebody leading the horse, me on the side of the horse. The dad was next to me. There's someone on the other side of the horse so these kids can't fall off. They can't get hurt. He had braces on his legs, and it was very stiff as he moved and just really struggled to get up there. And I thought, oh boy, I'm not sure this is going to work. So we put that lad on the horse and we started walking. And he was smiling, and he would pull his hat off and he would wave it around. He was just happy. It just brought joy to everyone in that group. We went around the arena once, and I turned and I said, "Do you want to go again?" He said, "Absolutely." We went around again. Usually he gave them 2 laps. I said, "Do you want to go again?" "Oh, yeah, we go again." So we went around a 3rd time. Now, you got to understand, when this little boy got on the horse, his feet were sticking kind of straight out towards the horse's shoulders because his legs were braced. I found out later it wasn't because of the braces, because his legs didn't bend. But as we rounded that third corner, I turned and looked at the father who's walking next to me. He had tears running down his face. I said, "Are you all right?" And he said, "Look." I looked over, and that little boy's legs went from a straight out position. They were bent almost as if to put his feet in the stirrups. He said that's the first time in his life he's ever bent his legs. That little boy taught more to us who were helping that day than we could have ever imagined. It brought new meaning to me to reach out to somebody who's maybe less fortunate. There's something you can do for anyone. I want to leave you with the message a friend of mine told me many years ago. He had multiple forms of cancer. He'd been through treatment. And he said, "I'm not doing that again," so he just said, "Enough." And it lasted about a year and a half. But we would have breakfast on Saturday mornings, and we did for 20 years. Very successful businessman, had ranches, oil wells, companies in a couple states. Just a really good guy, though, a real commoner. And he got real melancholy in the last few months of his life, and he would spend his mornings telling us things about his life and mistakes he'd made and things he'd done right, things he'd done wrong. But in the very end, he made a statement to me that I wrote down the minute I got back into my office. He said that every man at some time in his life will look at his financial wealth, his community status, and he'll pat himself on the back for the successes he's had in life. However, it's the people around you that really matter. Did you love them, and did they love you? Did you take care of them, and did they take care of you? He said, when it comes to that, it's not the size of your wallet or all the possessions you have. That is the true measures of success. Did you love them, and did they love you? I would hope that you'll leave this service today, go out and share God's love with the world. Put some love in your heart and give it to somebody you don't even know. Today we're going to share in a meal. Some have been fasting for Friday and Saturday and today. This meal hopefully means more to you today than it has in the past because of your efforts. We have the ultimate gift of love that God gave to us in His Son and the sacrifices that He gave to us through His death on the cross. Keep your hearts open, keep your minds open, and keep a hand out to those who might need it. Thank you.